That let us move into our webinar. Again, I thank each of you for joining us this morning, afternoon, to think about what does it mean to serve our communities, to move from a place of self-preservation, to think beyond ourselves and beyond our church community, to think a little bit about how do we serve those in need that are around us. And so let me just open us with prayer, and then we will dig right into our webinar. God, we thank you for these hands and these hearts and these lives that have joined us for this conversation this morning. God, we pray that your spirit would be alive with us, that your spirit would be alive in us. God, that you would prick our hearts with new ideas and new opportunities for how we can serve those that you have called us to. And so, God, would you touch our ears? Would you touch our hearts, that we would be silent enough in these moments, that nothing would be able to distract us in these moments, but that we would be attentive to hear your voice as you want to speak to us through these stories and through this conversation this morning. So we thank you, God, for being with us, and we thank you for your glory that will be revealed through our hands, our hearts, and through our churches as a result of the passion of these pastors that have, and these leaders that have joined us as they desire to serve their communities better. And so we thank you for this opportunity to be used by you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So let me just give a little introduction to what we're doing here. This particular webinar is a joint effort of the ECC Financial Relief Initiative, as well as the Love, Mercy, Do Justice ministry priority of the Covenant Church. And when the COVID season hit, the ECC began this financial relief initiative to bring support to our churches. And so there are 4 different components to the financial relief initiative. One of them is that funds were set aside for our pastors, the Ministry Crisis Fund, for those that are in our ministers themselves who are in crisis. Another piece of it was for our international organizations that are doing work around the world to help people in this season of COVID. And so there is funding through Covenant World Relief that we were able to release funds to the international context. And then there is also the short-term relief short-term relief loans that will, funding is still available actually to help our churches with 0 interest short-term loans that will help them to continue to pay the rent, the interest on their mortgage, utilities, etc., as it relates to keeping their churches in a good place in this season. And then the 4th part of that financial relief initiative is the Missional Relief Grant. And this very specifically was an opportunity for our churches to look beyond self-preservation and to think about how might God be calling us to serve the suffering who are surrounding our churches and our community. And so the Missional Relief Grant has allowed churches to add funding to maybe some outreach they were already doing, or to begin some sort of new project. And so what we have gathered today is some of our ministry, some of our missional relief grants recipients. And some of them are at the beginning of the project, some of them are nearing the end of their project, and some of their projects will be ongoing beyond the grant process. And so we've gathered them today to share some stories with us, to help us to see what they did, what their visions were, and how they're bringing change and transformation to their communities alongside their communities. And so I'm going to start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to just move in a circle around my screen. So Kevin, you are actually on my left.
So my name is Kevin Davenport, born and raised. Well, what all do you want us to say? Just name, church we're with, and city and state?
Yeah, and a little bit about your church, your ministry context. Tell us where you
Okay.
serve, a little bit about your context.
So my name is Kevin Davenport. I'm a minister at Oakdale Covenant Church, serving under the awesome leadership of Dr. D. Daryl Griffin, who's currently our senior pastor. We are located on the south side of Chicago in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood. It's a majority African-American neighborhood. Um, the span brain that whole south side area has suffered from disinvestment for a number of years. It's actually gotten worse over the last decade. And so we really have been focusing in on how can we begin to bring about more economic development, stabilize the business community, and address any areas of food scarcity that may be existing in the community.
Thank you, Kevin. John?
Hey everyone, so my name is John Teeter, and my wife and I were both born and raised in Los Angeles. So that's we have a lot of people who move here, so it's kind of rare. And we started Fountain of Life Covenant Church in 2007. So we just celebrated our 13th anniversary as a church, and then COVID hit and turned everything upside down. So we live and minister in West Long Beach. We have a really incarnational ministry philosophy, largely due to the great work of Dr. John Perkins with what it takes to actually make disciples in really rough environments. So we like to joke that our neighborhood is a little more hood than neighbor. And we try to do our parts with education programs. So we started a family center, and then we started a social enterprise in 2015 called 5,000 Pies, and addressing, as Pastor Kevin was saying, the food scarcity and also the job opportunity. So our environment was already challenging, and it's gotten a lot more challenging, especially with major financial troubles for a lot of people who are in industries that just got destroyed by COVID.
Thank you very much, John. Daryl?
I'm Daryl Johnson. I'm pastor of Walk of Faith Covenant Church. We founded the church as a ministry actually in 1983. And we actually joined Covenant in 1998. But we have been very active within the community. Not only am I the pastor here, I'm in one of the oldest African-American founded communities in the country, which is Mound Bayou, Mississippi. We are in the Mississippi Delta, which if we would draw graphs for African-American population, and it would be a color graph, darkest would be the blacks and white ratio. In our area, it would be probably the darkest as far as the graph is concerned. We in our town, it's 100% African-American, except for Phil, Kim, and three others. I don't know their names, but we also have some of the highest rates of some of the negative diseases, health problems. If it's in the African-American community, then we probably carry the highest instances. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we are running into a large problem. When they said it is in the African-American community, well, all of those negative statistics come to us in our area probably in the highest. So me being a pastor, I own a flower shop next to the funeral home, which keeps our business busy. Now, lost a neighbor front, a neighbor behind, and just Saturday when we were burying one of our last Mega Evers brother, which is Charles Evers. I was at the memorial, and they told me one of my best friend pastors died of COVID. And so this is what we're dealing with, and we're dealing with it on an everyday basis now. And so it's an impoverished area that really needs the type of service that we're giving. So we've become like, my wife and I have become like the mom and dad for a lot of things in this area. So, and grandma and grandpa for a lot of things in this area. So that's we're privileged to be a service to this area. We are.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if to call him Pastor Daryl or Mayor Daryl. He also used to be the mayor of this town as well.
Oh, and I didn't even say that I am former mayor of Mount Bayou and part of the World Conference of Mayors, and I'm vice president of World Conference of Mayors, and we started Historic Black Towns and Settlements, which I'm an original founding member.
Awesome. Thank you. Denise?
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Denise McKinney. I am a church planter in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have a little church plant called The Well that is about 5 blocks west of downtown Tulsa. That's where we've been meeting this summer, but the area that we are planting in is definitely the area west of downtown Tulsa. The history of that is I came off of staff of Redeemer Church here in Tulsa, which is about a 30-year-old covenant church. I served as a youth pastor and did worship and care ministry and several things there over the last 2 decades, and just really felt a nudge to from God to just look at where aren't churches being planted in town. And also, as many of you know, Tulsa is the place of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and we are in the beginning of our 100-year anniversary recognition and thinking through how do we retrieve that history, how do we go back and understand it more and make our city better. And obviously we've been in the news a few times this summer. So we thought, how about also trying to pick a part of town that we could really build a diverse church? And so we chose an area that is very much the intersection of, we say the intersection of economics, ethnicity, and experience. So there are many worlds that converge in the 2 main streets that are our main area. And we are trying to do our best to build space for people to trust and care for each other and pursue racial reconciliation, pursue political ideology reconciliation, things that seem to tear us apart, try to bring us together. So that's us. Our unique story is that on March 8th, we signed papers to be a church plant, and within 2 weeks, our world was shut down. So we had to hit pause because our church model is a dinner church model. We are trying to build a self-sustaining dinner church model, and it's kind of hard to gather around a dinner table and share a meal and have people share serving utensils and stuff. So that's why we had to hit pause. And when we heard about the grant, it was an awesome way for us to continue to build relationships in the community through service. So we're still doing food. We are just doing grab and go meals. So we either cater in something from a fast food place or a good chicken place, or we grill. We've got this huge grill, and we'll grill burgers or hot dogs or something and pre-package them, and people come and get them and then can take them home. But it gives us a touch point, a connect with folks in the area. And then we once a week give away groceries. And so we're serving folks that way too, and just trying to know names, hear stories, and encourage people in this journey. Our specific area has, it is an intersection. So you might have a lawyer living next to someone who hasn't been able to work for 30 years. And it's just very eclectic. And so we are trying to look at those needs. And what we've seen though is that folks who do have food insecurity, they have more of it. There's a lot more of it. There is a large amount of our population that are in the service industry. So you work at a hotel or a restaurant, you lost your job, or you got furloughed. So we're also looking at education situations too, because kids are starting school from a distance learning perspective, and a lot of children don't have access to Wi-Fi. So that's a little bit of our picture here in Tulsa.
Thank you, Denise. Awesome. Great segue to the next question. So Denise shared very specifically what was the grant, what was the project that was connected to her grant funding. So can my other panelists also share for you, what is the project that you're working on with your grant funding? And I'll start with you, Kevin. Unmute, yep.
First, let me say thank you to Evangelical Covenant Church and your department for extending us the grant funds to do this great work. We're grateful for the partnership that we have together. We really approached this from a perspective of how could we stretch the resources and the funding that we received beyond the season of COVID. We took time to really think about how could we maximize public-private partnerships, because as I indicated in the opening, our community has suffered from extreme disinvestment for a number of decades that has created a level of hopelessness and despair that we felt obligated to attempt to address. So there's been all kinds of news reports stating how the impact of COVID-19 has decimated restaurants in general, particularly Black-owned restaurants. And the reason why we focused in on that specific industry is because our community, as already has been highlighted, suffers from enormous food deserts. And so we could not afford to lose any additional food outlets, particularly those outlets that were owned by African Americans. And so we created a program by which we could provide some level of revolving loan fund to these African American owned restaurants, while at the same time stretching those resources, because in order to participate in the program, the restaurant must provide a food service to a nonprofit that is servicing a homeless population or servicing some other segment of the population that suffers from some level of food scarcity. And in addition to that, there also must be a training program where they're hiring at least one teenager at a neighbor technical school that specializes in hospitality and restaurant management. So for us, we wanted to make sure that we touched all of the critical touch points. And so we knew that in order to do that, we had to assemble a number of other partners outside of just the church. So we assembled CDFIs, we assembled other faith communities, we've assembled other organizations that's doing some of the technical assistance work. And this is really born out of Pastor Jemison, who was, I was actually born and raised under his leadership, told you how long I've been a part of Oakdale, who tagged the church as the community church that cares. And so Oakdale has always had a founding as a part of its mission to really care for community, to take care of community. And so we wanted to see how we could utilize this particular opportunity to do just that. And so that's kind of the overarching 30,000 foot perspective of what the program does. I can go in a little bit more details and specifics if you would like, Amelia, but I don't want to take up too much time because we have several panelists that need to discuss.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. And what the Missional Relief Grant Review Team really loved about this application and the structuring of their project is that they're not just focusing on feeding people, but asking the question, why are they hungry? Why is this a food desert, and how can we shift that narrative? And so, and then even the added perspective of thinking about vocationally forming our youth to begin to understand what it means to, and how can you run your own restaurant business in your neighborhood, I think just takes it to the next level. Thank you. John, can you share with us what your project is? There you go.
Yeah, so when we started Fountain of Life, I'm like you, Kevin, has it been this many years? When did we age so quickly? We really founded it on Luke's gospel. So we wanted to be with our neighbors, for our neighbors, understand the needs. And one of my favorite quotes comes from David Bosch. And he was the South African missiologist. And he said, Matthew, Mark, and John teach you how to be disciples. They teach you Bible believing, lost winning, word preaching, spirit filled, cross carrying. You're a real deal disciple. But it's Luke who tells you where you should live out your discipleship, and that's among the poor. And I think this is the big question: who benefits from our discipleship? And I think Luke would say if it's people who are on the elite status, and if it's people who look just like you, even sinners do that. So you need the Holy Spirit. So Ramili, I want to just echo Pastor Kevin's comment. Thank you so much for your role and your team's role in providing this. And this has just been a massive shot in the arm for what we've already been really trying to do. So we divided the grant into two parts right off the bat. The first part was designated just around gifts. So even in Acts, mercy is such a major part. So we just half of it right to food. So building on all the relationships that we have 150 families that we're in regular food provisions for over the past 3 months. It's been a great blessing. And then the second half has been designated based on Acts 8, where, deeply the greatest need for our city is that they get around the one who can handle all the problems. And so Psalm 23 has been really big for us in this project, as people maybe they're in green pastures, but they need the shepherd's leadership, or so many are walking through the valley in so many ways. They need the shepherd. So we've been living into Acts 8, the part about the chariot where Philip gets beamed. So we've been trying to get closer to the chariot and see what people are, how God's already at work. So we've assembled an evangelism team. We've had a 7-week series on evangelism training to ask the questions, how God is already at work. And with the neighbors, we've been using the resources to get into their lives in this really tender and painful moment.
Thank you, John. And Pastor John swirled around it a little bit, but I also want to name just this really unique way that their project is feeding the homeless, but they're doing it through 5,000 Pies, which is this opportunity to keep those on the margins working and to support just this opportunity for people to build dignity and to be able to maintain their businesses and to be entrepreneur in the restaurant. And so this partnership of church and community, I think, is another beautiful way that our churches have come alongside their community to serve their community. So partnership is something that you'll hear a lot as we think about what are some of the best ways to do ministry outreach, to not only think about what are the resources of our church, but what are the resources of the people in the community? What might others already be doing in the community that we can come alongside and partner
Amen.
with to also be able to serve who even are in business and are residents of the community where we live, to help support their livelihood as well. So we just love that about their application. Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you.
And Pastor Daryl, tell us a little bit about your project.
Well, actually, our project was ongoing. we were serving the community, and this grant was just a great boost for us, because we didn't know where we were going to get what we said we were going to do. We didn't know where we were going to get the money from. We had already been expending money on doing utilities, helping people that actually, we had a lot of, maybe I could say, health problems, hunger problems, and money problems that showed up during this time. And I think we were kind of like some of the first to really have those problems because you have such high instances of poverty in this area. We are food desert. You have to travel 10 miles just to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So, and again, a lot of people wonder why a lot of the people in the Mississippi Delta are some of the heaviest people, obese. It's because of the diets, and that's where you get your sicknesses. So having to deal with that, and because you can't move around in these places like you can, because you don't have sidewalks, you don't have streets like you do in more urban places. I started attacking this as the mayor, and I started what was called the Mayor's Health Council. And we would actually having conversations with convenience stores and other people, but doing to actually bring in fresh fruits and vegetables. And it really wasn't working like you wanted it to work. Sometimes they would come up and we would set up partnerships and with some people that had fresh fruits and vegetables, but it just wasn't selling the way we wanted it to sell. So actually we influenced them, some of the groups here, to actually give them fresh fruits and vegetables and just let people get it free. And so that's what we finally did during this crisis, is just having one of our organizations just to provide the fresh fruits and vegetables, especially during the summertime, where they can come in and get it. We also have set up partnerships with some of the groups that's doing some of the things that we're doing, but we're not doing it at the level that we were doing it. We established partnerships with them. We have one of the oldest health centers in the country right here in Mound Bayou, rural health centers. That movement was started in Mound Bayou, where you have rural health centers. And they are partners with us. And that's great, because when the pandemic happened, we were able to help them establish sites across the whole Delta. They began to test when other people were having problems testing. They were testing. And because of some of my influence on the board, and I'm not going to go into that, but we were able to help to get booster money for them to get started, to start the testing. We also were our partners with the Catholics Mercy Center that's here. They turned the old school into a Mercy Center. And again, I'm sitting on another board that gives grants to specific people, and we were able to get grants to them. And so I used my influence to go over there and set up that partnership where they are able to, we receive money so that we would be able to give food and drive trucks, because we didn't know that whether people going to be able to have transportation. Well, we were able to move that money to something else, because the group that I influenced to get involved then also got involved with the transportation. And so we didn't have to have the transportation. So we were able to move that money to something else. We didn't actually need to get transportation because it was already provided. So we started being able to pass food out which people needed, and we were able to do that. But we have a lot of different stories of people, just all types of stories of people having a, certain small crisis, and we were like the fire truck, just running to the different, they were able to come to us, and we were able to help them out in many ways. So we grabbed a lot of partnerships. Our school district has 100% free meals. Saying that means that every child in our area qualifies for free lunch. And when this pandemic happened, that was the only meal that some of those kids were getting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to make sure that those people would continuously get free meals. And so one of the things that we did was made sure that those people were, because actually they started and somebody got COVID and they stopped. So I had to go back over there and work out with them how to make it safer, because you just can't stop, because we had many kids and too many families that were dependent on that food. And actually it would go past just the kids, because the parents couldn't eat either. It just trickled down to everybody else in the household who were not. Because if they couldn't eat, then they had to get enough food for everybody to eat. And then the whole family is hungry. So we had to deal with all of that. We still are having to deal with that. And we're also looking for the next 3 to 5 months ahead, because there are some things that we know that's going to be happening, and we are now trying to prepare for those things as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Daryl. So in Pastor Daryl's context, they have used their funding for a number of different things. And so in their space, they've also provided rent and utility relief for individuals. And like Pastor Daryl said, providing those fresh fruits and vegetables so that in the midst of this, that people can stay healthy. And this is also this way of providing for farmers who are in the area. And so we thought that was also a beautiful presentation of just caring for the whole community context that you displayed. If a couple of you can respond to this question, when we think about, as a church, we're very accustomed to doing ministry outreach and to reaching out to the needy and those around us. How does that differ in the midst of this COVID crisis? How does ministry outreach differ in the midst of the COVID season? Yep.
Can we hear from Denise's and her project?
Yeah, she shared she described their project. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. That's right. Thank you.
I also want to name, there's a Q&A for our attendees. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There will be a Q&A section near the end of the webinar. And so feel free at any point to begin to drop questions into the Q&A section so that we can answer them during the question and answer session. Go ahead, Pastor Daryl.
Our ministry actually flowed into this. Mm-hmm. Our ministry was not different. We started off as ministry. We became, like I said, we became mom and dad. Our ministry became like mom and dad for all types of situations. We even have other churches that look to us to do specific things. Organization that look to us to do specific things. So we just absolutely just flowed into this. It was just an expectation to be able to minister to to these people. And I'm glad you brought up with our farmers, because we are in partnership with Alcorn State University Demonstration Research Farm, which is like a half a mile from town. And we partner with them, and they deal with fruits and vegetables. And people actually, we send them out there to get food, and they can actually pick the food or get food, and they turn half of it over to them, and they can get the other half, and it's for them free. So we were able to just get people just started, just sending them out there and getting part of the food. But as far as the ministry is concerned, this is part of our work. This is what we do. And because of it, we were able to just go right into it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Daryl. I love that idea too, just as we think about ministry outreach, we always want to be thinking about what are the ways to bring dignity to people. And so I love this idea of individuals being able to go out and pick their own food, and to be able to provide not only for themselves, but also for others in the community. So I love that idea. Pastor Denise, can you say a little bit about, because I think you touched on it a little bit. You talked about this reality that here you are, this dinner church that was reaching out to your community, and then you had to transition during this season of COVID. So how does ministry outreach differ for you guys in this season?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I would say it's still very much centered around food and a shared meal. It's just that the shared meal at this point isn't a communal sit around the table meal. It is a shared meal that, instead of come and share, it's share to go. So we are sharing groceries and we're sharing meals. And I guess the difference is we don't have as much time in a communal format to sit and really hear each other's stories around a table. Obviously, dinner church is a grace and a mercy in a community that has food insecurities. So it provides, a meal for folks to come to, which is a wonderful draw for them to hear the gospel. But when we had to pivot, then it became much more one-on-one. And instead of having an hour with somebody, we have the 5 minutes that they're there at the community house waiting for us to get their meal. But the beauty of it is when you spend 5 minutes talking with somebody, that's probably more than, I would be able to do with every person that comes to dinner church in terms of knowing all their stories. And so the gospel is incarnated into the conversation instead of the storytelling, which hopefully in all of our churches, we're trying to be incarnational in our relationships too. But just this idea that the 5 minutes I have with them to know their name, to ask them, hey, are you from Tulsa? Are you from this neighborhood? And let them tell you their story is the gospel opportunity that I have to share the love of God with them and to encourage them. A few times, you say, they tell you something that's difficult in their life, and you say, can I pray for you before you go? And just trying to create those connections that don't have a transaction to them. They're not feeling like, oh, I have to come to church. I'm coming for food, but then they meet us and know us, and we know them. So I would say dinner church tends to be outwardly focused anyway, but now our focus, we've just got this finite amount of time to know them, but then they come back the next week and you build on that. So I would say that's the biggest difference. And a few of our folks that come live on the levee. The Arkansas River flows through Tulsa. It's kind of our main waterway, and there's a park system that runs all along it. It's beautiful. And the west of downtown, there's a levee, which is prone to flooding, and they're trying to get it fixed, but there's a whole homeless population that lives on the levee. And we've even met some of those folks and started to build relationships with them. And for them to say, to walk into a church is a little bit intimidating. They just know somebody maybe look at them and say, wow, where are you from? And so when you're grilling outside and they could just come up and walk and talk to you. And I have one couple that they've started coming a little bit early, and they're on bikes, and they take our signs and put them out for us. And so they want to help. So I would say the other thing that's been fun is to watch people who have not yet come to dinner church want to receive help and also want to serve. And you mentioned the dignity of help, not just being us giving, but someone else having something that they want to contribute to. So we have 3 or 4 people that both are receiving the services and have said, can I help? And so they're coming every week and helping with something. And so that's been a neat, I think it would take longer in our normal church settings to get somebody to that point. And so that's been a real beautiful thing. So.
I love that, Pastor Denise. That's such a beautiful story. This idea that God has moved the church out the building, and that it's opened up this new opportunity for folk in this homeless population that lives on the levee to say, I don't know about the steeple. I don't want to go in the steeple building, but they will come and have food and share a meal. I love that. That's such a great story.
Yeah, I want to jump in here a bit because COVID has really created an enormous amount of challenges from the perspective of it has exacerbated the need. And so for our context, the social services industries have been impacted. So they can't perform the functions that they normally would function. The schools have been impacted. So they can't perform the functions that they normally would function. So many different sectors of society have been impacted. And because we're talking about a community that has not received any level of investment, there's a direct correlation between the COVID-19 cases and the level of investment in the community. So because of the fact we're talking about communities that have been disproportionately disinvested in over a number of decades, these are the communities that have the highest number of COVID cases. And at the same time, they have the least amount of services available to them. And so for us, it's been a challenge, because how do we meet this great demand in front of us with the limited resources that we have? So the beauty of, I would say this movement, if I was to put it in the positive, is you're seeing the true discipleship at work. So there's a number of professionals like myself. We're not on church staff, but we've been volunteering our time towards helping in this particular situation. So every single week, there's a number of individuals from the church who are outside with posters and signs saying free food, where individuals can come and pick up a box of food. These are not individuals who are on the church payroll, but these are individuals who are recognizing the need, seeing the need, and trying to do everything that they can. We have a school at our church, as many of you know, Oakdale Christian Academy, trying to figure out where do we get the resources from to try to outfit that particular building so that it can receive students. And at the same time, we have a number of congregants who are itching to get back into the sanctuary. So much so, we have one longtime member of Oakdale, who's been a member of Oakdale for a number of years, who's relocating to another part of the country. And this particular individual just wanted to sit in the sanctuary one more time before they moved. And so there's all kinds of different scenarios that we're having to confront and manage, and different people are doing different things from different perspectives and different vantage points, because we have an enormous need. We don't have time for me to just run down the list of businesses that have been closed. We don't have time to literally run down the number of social service function outfits that are no longer providing those functions. We had to fight like heck just to get a COVID-19 test in our community, because the testing was not done in places where our folk could easily access them. I could go on and on and on. In the church, particularly in the African American context, has always been viewed as the center point or the focal point for community. And so we've been struggling, trying to figure out who can touch this angle, who can touch that angle, who can we engage in partnership that can handle this, who can engage in partnership that can handle that. So it's a very different time pre-COVID, because like I said, the need is so great. But I would say the beauty is that you have people who are really genuinely coming together in a way that I haven't seen happen before to try to address this particular situation in need.
Thank you, Reverend Kevin. And to piggyback off of that, the next that's a great segue for the next question I wanted to ask is, obviously the need is so great, and Love Mercy Do Justice uses a Matthew Micah framework. So we think about Jesus saying, I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me drink, I was in prison and you visited me. And so we offer kind of this framework with this reality that there are so many areas of ministry that you can choose from. And so I want to ask each of you, how did you decide, with so many needs in each community? People have needs for their rent to be paid. They don't want utilities to be turned off, obviously. Education, as students transition into digital frameworks, or even if they're going to be in the school building, like Kevin was saying, outfitting the school so that it can be safely prepared for the teachers and students to come back. There's so many needs that exist in a community. How did each of you in your churches decide which need to tackle? Did you do a community assessment? If you did do that, what did that involve? How did you decide which way to go and what level of this catastrophe to tackle? Pastor Daryl.
On mute. Okay, I'm off mute.
There you go.
Our area obviously would be more involved with social work. My wife is a social worker, and most of these organizations have a social work aspect. We were able to tap into that area. And my wife, several years ago, when she was working with one of these agencies, set up a social work network so that they would keep files on people who came for help for certain things, so that they wouldn't duplicate and then misuse it and abuse it. She went another step further. She set up a system called Skin in the Game. And that system called Skin in the Game would then allow people to do something, being a part of the service to other people. And then they would get something like points. And these points will allow them to be able to get help based on their points, so that they won't just get something and just have a handout, but then they'll have some skin in the game. And so they get to know these people here. We get to know these people, unlike in the urban areas where you don't. We get to know a lot of these people, and we know about some of these needs. And so that's how we're able to attack those needs based on some of the programs that these people have already set up.
Absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead, Pastor John. Unmute.
First, I want to give a big shout out to Pastor Denise. Church planting is so hard. Second week, COVID hit. Oh, God bless you and your team. Ramelia, great question. So the three things that we looked at is one, first, we really tried to listen to people. So we've been here forever. A lot of people trust us. So we would just ask, especially as people picked up their food, what are the needs that you're having? Totally agree, Kevin, Reverend Kevin, with there's so many assumptions in our city, in Long Beach. everything's moving online. Well, we have a lot of folks who don't have computers, a lot of folks who don't have internet. And so we really tried to do three things. Is one, listen to the needs and really lean more into just what the families need. And then also, what are the things that we actually can do? Just realizing our limitations, and then Holy Spirit leading and guiding. So I think, Denise, you said that you could, the quantity may not be there in terms of how many people, but the quality is impactful. So just this past week, we have neighbors just down the street, and we came back from a full day, and I got out of the car and we had some meals that we've been handing out, and I heard the Holy Spirit say, go talk to this family. And I didn't want to do it. I was so tired. The Laker game was actually just starting. I got to watch my team in the bubble. And I really felt the Spirit say, no, go deliver the family meal. So I walked down there, I delivered the family meal, and I'm speaking with Dontrella. And we just had such a great conversation, social distance. They loved the food. And then afterwards, she was like, now, what about you? You're a pastor, right? Are you okay? And I said, yeah. She goes, I drive by the school and I think of you guys, and I don't see anyone on Sundays. And I said, oh, we went online. And then she actually said, what do you do? And I said, well, we're in a season of forced isolation. It's actually common in the Bible. There's 3 instances where, one, God's people choose forced isolation, Sabbath. There's involuntary forced isolation, which largely is like persecution, Paul in prison. And then there's sovereign. And really the 2 sovereign forced isolations are war and pandemic. And it just kind of normalized it for her. And she goes, I want to check out your church. So I went home, gave her a flyer, and she hopped on and she goes, I didn't even know there was live streaming church. This is great. So she's become kind of a part of our community. So I think that's one of the things is we listen to the people, what are our limits, but what we can do, but ask the Spirit to really direct where he's moving already.
Absolutely. So it sounds like really for Pastor Dale and Pastor John, it's just this listening to the people, and that has guided the way. And really, I think even listening very specifically to those people that you've been in relationship.
Yeah.
So when you think about doing ministry outreach in this season, it doesn't even have to be some big project that you go do beyond who you are or what you've already done. But what about those people that are in the midst of your church, that have been connected to your church previously, and thinking about how to best serve those community needs right around you? Any other thoughts on that?
I'd love to add, and I think this service is still available through the Covenant, but they definitely tell us about it in Church Planting, the Ministry Insight platform. So when you're doing church planting, they encourage you to look at the demographics of your area, and we actually used that to help us determine where to church plant. It was the combination of the information we got on Ministry Insight and relationships we already had in the area that we chose that made it a no-brainer of where we needed to church plant. But Ministry Insight, which talk to your superintendent if you don't know what it is, every church in the Covenant has a paid subscription to it, I believe, through the Covenant. So you just get a password and log on. But you type in the address and it gives you the demographics of the area. So you can look at education issues, you can look at household income, ethnicity, percentages, and just a lot of information, ideology, how people perceive faith and life. And I just think that it doesn't replace listening personally to people, but it gives you a snapshot of what maybe some of the tangible needs might be in the area. So I would encourage people to check that out. We just finished that, so it was really helpful for us to already know what some of the needs were in our area.
Awesome. That was very timely for such a time as this. Thank you, Pastor Denise. Reverend Kevin?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time thinking about this. because we had conversation around kind of a more traditional food pantry component. And where we landed was really trying to figure out how could we maximize the grant dollars, because we realized that the investment in these particular times are critical. And so we wanted to touch as many different sectors as we possibly could. And so one sector was the youth component, because youth are very, very important to us. A second component was the food scarcity component that we've already talked about. But a third component was an economic development component, and gets into that micro enterprise piece, because we really felt like we needed to do more to support Black entrepreneurship because of the wealth divide that currently exists in our country. And kind of what motivated that was, it's depressing when you see businesses go up on the 95th Street corridor, which is a main corridor in Chicago, and they close in a year. And so with COVID-19, you saw more and more and more closed permanently signs along that corridor. My heart broke because a few months ago, prior to COVID, I want to say this was sometime late last year, we had a meeting. Senator Dick Durbin, U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, visited our church and met with Pastor Griffin, myself, and our principal for our school, Watrice Richardson. And as a part of that meeting, the senator wanted to kind of have a slice of pizza at one of the local restaurants that was on the 95th Street corridor. So we went to that particular place that was located a couple of blocks away from the church. And it broke my heart to now learn that that business is closed less than a few months later. And so that's the type of devastation that we're talking about. And so we felt that we needed to find a way to touch as many people as we possibly could touch. And so that's the way we kind of landed on the project that we selected.
Wow, thank you for that, Reverend Coven. And I think that story illustrates really similarly what each of you has said is really being present. And that being present in the community also opens your eyes to that place, in those places where God is calling your church to serve. So I appreciate that as well, just this idea of being present in the community God is calling you to serve. At this time, I'm going to share a short video, and this video is an example of what one of our congregations has done with the grant, and it speaks to community partnership. And so then that's going to lead into a question for our panelists about how their particular grant has partnered with different organizations in the community or with the community itself. But this, I'm going to share my screen here and pray that it works. I'm going to ask the panel to give me a thumbs up if they can see and hear this. Oh.
My biggest fear was to make mistakes. I was a pretty shy kid.
Oh, sorry.
In different respects. I mean, I was super talkative. I mean, I have a lot of reports for that. But when it came to having to sing in front of people, that shook me so much. I would have joined the choir around like first grade. So I had to sing in front of all my friends. I was just so like, oh my God, what if I mess up? What if my voice cracks? My music teacher, Miss McVeigh, there were a lot of moments that I think she really pushed me and kind of forced me, and for better. She would say, Javon, you're gonna sing this part. And I'm like, I don't know about that. having people around me that told me that no matter what's going on the outside, you can make it. You can do it if you put your mind to it. All of those words constantly hearing that, I was like, okay, maybe I can go up and sing. Maybe I can join this club. Maybe I can meet people I've never met. Maybe I can speak. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song. Even today, I hear a lot of the world is out to get you. Present as bright. Let's say that it is true. Being that king, I was never told to let that stop me. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
And so this is an example of what Portland Covenant Church has done. Pastor Stephen Burlin and his leadership team had previously had a modicum of a relationship with Martin Luther King Elementary School in their community. And they had previously, done things with the school or provided things to the school every now and then. And then the COVID pandemic, in addition to this grant, gave them an opportunity to think bigger about what can we do to serve our community. And very specifically, they thought, what about if we support very specifically the families of this school that we've been a part of to enhance this relationship and connection that we have with this community. And so they have, with their grant funds, used a small portion to create this video that tells the story of an individual that went to the school, who also happens to be a member of Portland Covenant Church community. And so to be able to tell the story of how this particular school has shaped the life of this individual, and then to invite the community to give to this stabilization fund that will provide resources to the families that are suffering in the pandemic at this school. And so they will use this video to do a media campaign and invite the community of Portland to give resources to help the school, but more very specifically to help the families survive in the midst of this pandemic. So just a really creative way of asking the community to come together, not that we're just doing this alone as a church, but we're inviting the community to join us and to be a part of this as well. And so that's something that I've seen in a lot of our applications as well. What a lot of our churches are doing is inviting their communities to join with them. And so I want to ask our panelists in what ways, whether it be another organization, or whether it be some sort of mutual aid fund like this video. We actually have a few grantees that are doing some sort of mutual aid fund like this. What ways have you invited the community or also other organizations in your community to be a part of what you're doing for the community? Yeah, go ahead, Pastor John.
Yeah, the two existing ministries that we already had are the education for the youth and then the economic social enterprise. So the resources have really accelerated those two. We've been able to actually move online. So our numbers of students that we've been able to tutor over the summer have actually really ballooned because more people are around. We have more tutors. And it's kind of a different model that we're considering. So we've been able to have people come and partner with us. And then with, our food is it's one of my great thanks and graces from God is when we were starting, everyone always says you have to really look and see what God's already doing in the community. So our first convert was a chef. He was an urban chef. He had a really worldly background. He had a lot of gang activity, but he trained himself in cordon bleu. So Chef Mike was the first convert that we had in our church. And 12 years later, I never could have imagined the leader that he would become. So as we've been partnering through our restaurant, we have 14 employees, but we have younger people who are seeing what's happening. They want to do it. So the team is launching a youth program, job training. So we've kind of kept it within our limits. We try to really preserve our resources emotionally as well. We're hunkering down for a marathon. I don't think this is going to be a storm or even a winter. This is going to be an ice age. So I think those are the things that we're doing. And as we partner, we always kind of veer more, especially to the youth. I remember when I was 16. I look at our daughter is 15. She goes to the local high school, and just the kids, I really worry about their mental health, and so much socialization is gone. So much sports is gone. And, that we kind of joked about this. The policy, at least in LA, was safer at home. And I'm like, for a lot of these kids, it's not safer. It's worse at home. And how are we going to create opportunities within the distancing where they can experience the life of the gospel and healthier relationships? So there's a couple things we're trying to do.
Absolutely. I love that idea of thinking about the youth and how can we help to serve them in this season. And a couple of our grantees have done that via providing technology resources for students so that they can be connected to friends and that kind of thing, but also to their school environments for educational purposes as well. Any other thoughts on that?
So real quick for us, we've engaged a number of partners. We're up to right now about 5 or 6 other churches. The churches that are part of our project are interdenominational, so it's not just one denominational. We also have a strong partnership that we've developed with one of the leading CDFIs or community development financial institutions in the area. We're at the end of the day, we'll probably have about 40 to 50 different types of project partners, because like I said, for us, the need is great, but the resources are limited. So we've been trying to figure out how do we creatively do some of the things that Pastor John talked about, where we're giving people the opportunity to operate in their lane of specialty or their lane of emphasis in terms of ministry, but at the same time tapping into the laity, because you have laity during these particular times who have enormous expertise that can also make significant contributions. So we're trying to open up the toolbox, if you will, to kind of reimagine how ministry work gets done in these particular times where resources are scarce, but the need and the demand is far greater than any other point in time.
Absolutely. Kevin, I love what I really believe both you and John are saying is this reality that in the covenant, we say we're better together. And I think very specifically, even thinking about, Pastor John, you were saying emotional exhaustion. And I think sometimes as leaders, we put ourselves up front and we pour ourselves out because it's what we're supposed to do. But maybe sometimes ignoring the reality that we also are being affected by this pandemic as well. And so I think this reality of doing things in partnership with other organizations really strengthens the resource because we have others to depend on as well in the midst of it. Anything else? 60 seconds, because I'm going to move to question and answers. I want to leave sufficient time for that. Denise, did you want to say something?
Sure. I would just really quickly say we had planned partnerships, unplanned partnerships, and some seeds that have been planted for partnerships. So the planned ones were with our sending church, and the Northwest Tulsa Hub, which is a community center that they helped get going, that we also have a lot of overlap with. So we partnered with them to provide meals for every night for a teen camp that just was 4 to 7, give kids a place to be and to play basketball. And I know that sounds crazy in COVID, but they figured out a way to kind of do that. So we helped with that. That was planned. We also worked with the neighborhood association that we're in. An unplanned one was a food pantry in rural Oklahoma, in my husband's hometown, but we drive out there every week, and the government, I know this is happening everywhere, the semis that come in through Go Fresh and they hand out boxes of food. There are like 6 or 7 places in Tulsa. We go to Inola and they give us a carload of produce, which is free, which then allows us to do non-perishables from the grocery store with our grant money. So we combine those two. And then we've just had some really neat seeds planted for future partnerships of people just driving up, asking what we're doing, and then we find out they work for a nonprofit and they want to jump in and help us with something this fall.
That's good.
So, yeah.
I love that, Pastor Denise. So just showing up with some resources in your hand, which could be from the church community, which could be from your church funds, which could be from ministry relief grant funds, and then even God multiplies that and makes more when you show up with what you have in your hands. I love that. So we're going to move into a question and answer session. I encourage you, if you have any questions of any of the panelists, to drop those questions in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen. So one question that came in is, with these outreach projects and programs that you're doing, how does the church screen for COVID-19 symptoms? Is it appropriate to do so while providing food and resources? So Pastor John answered by saying, in our ministry applications, we adhere to strict social distancing practices. Those who receive food and resources have been great to also allow safe practices. We don't screen for symptoms. We haven't run into any problems to this point. How do others want to answer that? COVID screening, especially around food and providing food and resources.
We, most of our stuff is outside and we do this social distancing. Our team, uses hand sanitizer before we handle things. And sometimes this community, some people don't have any social distancing quorum. And if they've come up to shake your hand before you've ever been able to say, can we just do an elbow bump or something? So then, you hand sanitize again. I feel like God has, at least at this point, we have not had any issues. When we are indoors, we ask everyone to wear a mask and we keep the social distancing. We don't screen because they're in and out quickly. And then we just, if they don't have a mask, we have a supply of masks and we give them one. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Very practical. Any other? Yeah, Pastor Daryl.
We are pretty strict because we have a high rate of death here. And we've historically here, we've had people that tested positive while they were helping. And so that's dangerous. So most of the pass outs and all of the things, the activities that we have, we make sure that people get screened. And if a person cannot say that I have been screened and I've tested negative, they don't participate. And I mean, that's basically it. And so that has become almost a unspoken rule that you have to be tested to be part of what we're trying to do for the public. So.
Absolutely. Very practical, very safe to keep even those who are on the front lines, if you will, serving the community, keeping them safe as well. Any other thoughts on that question or any other questions from the community who's listening? While we're waiting, I don't see any questions that are currently in the question and answer box. I will ask, and please feel free to go ahead and drop a question in the box and we'll respond to that. But let me ask our panel, do any of you have a special story, maybe a transformational story about something that happened as a result of your ministry to the community in this season? Pastor Daryl.
Okay, I'm trying to unmute. This is something that our church provided, this youth group that is actually growing, and their project is to provide fresh fruits and vegetables to the public. And what they do is they connect with all of the farmers in the area, even if it's a small garden, and they buy their fruits and vegetables. Then they have a little thing that they set up a farmer's market. It's a mobile farmer's market. Well, our church was able to provide for them the actual building that they set in, they have. And also, because of my influence with our other partner, which is the Catholics were trying to sell their land, and they sold it to this funeral home owner who was my friend. And he called me after they sold most of it's basically farmland around their building. And he sold that. When he called me and asked me, what am I going to do with this, this property? I said, you're going to partner with Delta Fresh, Food Revolution kids, and you're gonna allow them to grow fruits and vegetables right there. And so we're in the middle of all of this, because we got all these partners. We're in the middle of getting Delta Fresh to be able to grow all of their fruits and vegetables on the Catholic's property and put a hothouse on there as well. And so that's going to also provide other fresh fruits and vegetables. And the kids are involved with that. And it's a great story. And I'm glad we're in the middle of that right now during this pandemic.
Wow, amen, amen. God just multiplying help and life and food for the community. I love that. Any other transformational stories?
I would say my favorite one, there's been a few where we've just like we've nudged people closer to faith and maybe closer to wanting to be a part of the well when we relaunch. The couple that lives on the levee, last week they came up. They're the ones that show up early and go, can we help? And they ride their bikes and put signs out for us. They came in and like, we've been together for about 7 years and we're thinking we need to get married. And then they're kind of winking like, hey, Denise, do you think maybe you could handle that for us? And so we'll see if they follow through, but just to feel like they can come in and be a part and then say, hey, could you help us take this next step? So that's probably one of my favorite ones. And then I would just say the best question we've heard is like just being out there and being present when people drive by and go, what are you doing? And then you can like tell them, and you can tell them all about what you're doing and what you believe about God's love for them. And so I love how easy the opening questions are. So.
Wow, that's beautiful. Again, just this idea of being present is emerging from the stories that you guys are sharing. Being present in the community is this opportunity to provide God's love and God's presence with people. Yeah, Pastor John. We can't.
This isn't like transformational in the outward fruit sense, but I think we forget how much we have being under the shepherd's care. And if Jesus is really our food and we need him more than water and he's our life, the story that just reminds me this week is how reactive the world is, how hurting the world is, but how different the world is, and what a moment it is to teach our church what it means to be disciples. So we took one of the family meals that we've been using for the grant, and I have 3 children, so we're out in the meeting new people. We met a new guy, and literally a cordon bleu chef cooked this meal, brand new. So with the new person, we said, hey, we got some great food for you. And he's like, cool, here's my apartment, meet me there in 30 minutes. And we're like, okay. But he was really cold. And, so we met him on the street. So I go over there with the kids, we go to his apartment, knock on the door. We literally give him this cordon bleu meal. And he just picks it up, doesn't say a word, bam, just slams the door in our face. And I'm just like, 1, people are hurting so much. 2, they're so anxious, overwhelmed. And 3, the kingdom is so real. So we just stopped and we prayed for this guy. We know where he lives. I don't know what's going on, but it was just a great moment. It's such a process for everybody, but there's a way that the hate makes us stronger. And so there's something that's transforming us. I think that's the thing I don't want to really just miss, is in God's sovereignty, not only this season is supposed to make us stronger. So the lesson that I'm telling our church is, yes, do everything, but know that the main thing God's doing is in you, and win the wait. So when it opens up again, we're not going to be more like the world. We'll be more like Jesus.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great word. That not only is God seeking to transform the communities that we're serving, but how is God also seeking to do something in our own souls? I love that. So one last question we have, we got about 3 minutes. This question is, how does the community respond with churches doing outdoor services, or is the trend to do virtual services? If so, how do we share with the community those services on the online platform?
We do both. We do online services. We provide that, and we have an online audience that actually our reach has grown tremendously. We even have people from other countries that's involved in our services now. But we also have had intermittently outside service, but in Mississippi, it is absolutely too hot to have them outside right now. But when we get a chance, we will have them back outside because we're able to reach some of the ones that are in the area that otherwise wouldn't be getting ministry. So this has provided more ministry opportunities for us.
Awesome, thank you. And I want to respect the time. With our last 2 minutes that are remaining, I do want to share with our audience the ministry relief grant. And if Celeste, you could drop the link in the chat bar for our attendees. The ministry relief grant is formulated as a short-term grant that will help you to either enhance some ministry that you're doing to the community outside of your church, or to begin a ministry that you want to do. Maybe you've been present in your community as these leaders and pastors have been, or maybe you are aware of some need that is in your community that you want to be able to serve, but maybe just need some extra funding to be able to allow that to manifest in your community. So if you are interested in the grant, there are still some funds that are available. You can apply for the grant process. You are responded to within 7 to 10 business days after you apply. There are a number of forms to read before you actually apply, and the application is available online, and you can submit that grant application. And really what the grant review team is looking for is to see how you're serving the community outside of your church. This is intended to be a space for outreaching and serving the needs of those that surround you. And so if you are interested, you can reach out to me. Celeste, can you put my email in there as well? You can email me if you have any questions about the Ministry Relief Grant. But essentially you submit the application, it's reviewed by the Ministry Relief Grant Review Team, and then you receive a response, like I said, within 7 to 10 business days. There is then a final report that we ask you to complete about 3 months later, just to give us some details about how you have served your community. So with that, we are 1 minute over our time. I want to thank each and every one of these panelists that have come to share with us stories about the beauty of the way that you've brought the shalom of God to your communities. And so I do thank you for sharing your stories. I thank you also for our attendees that have shared time and space with us today. So we thank you for listening to these stories, and we pray that they have inspired you and encouraged you to come to your community for service in some way. And so please reach out to us, to LMDJ, if you have any further questions and would like to apply for a ministry relief grant. So with that, we'll sign off, but any final word from our panelists that you want? Oops, sorry, anything you want to quickly say?
Ramelia, thank you for you.
Yes, absolutely.
You've been such a blessing during COVID to us and our church and your department. So thank you to Paul and all the team. We bless you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just a word from the audience. Thank you for this panel. Great representation and very informative.
Really, thank you. A church plant. It was a dream to be able to do to be able to do this work this summer. So,
amen.
Keep
amen.
up the good work, Denise.
All right. Okay. Bless you, my friends. Take care. Bye.